Hello and welcome. My name is Cheryl Marabella, and I'll be presenting the webinar today on behalf of EAP IBH. I'm excited you have chosen to join us today. Today we are talking about something we all know well, stress. But because of the unprecedented challenges, and boy, we've had a year of unprecedented challenges, uncertainty, and stress we are all facing due to the pandemic right now, this topic is more important than ever. More specifically, we're going to take a slightly different approach to stress than you may be used to. Today, we're going to focus on our response to stress and not a way of coping or relieving or even just preventing in the ways we typically think about ways to manage stress, in quotes. Instead, we're going to talk about stress as a stress cycle triggered, but as one that we can learn how to complete that cycle so we can return to a balanced state. And in this training, we're going to harness the science of our stress response, learn a little bit about strategies to calm it, reframe it, move it, and manage it to complete the cycle and ultimately stress better. We want to also mention that we are certainly aware and understand that these times are so difficult and have been so challenging for so many. And we just want to let you know that we are here for you as your EAP, and we're so glad that you joined this call today. Before we get going, we'd like you to take a moment to read this disclaimer and just to remember to always seek the advice of your physician and healthcare providers. Change. Change is situational. External life events that will inevitably occur all the time on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis. The only constant really in life is change. During change events, we go through the psychological process of transition, where we try to make sense of it even in terms of the endings, the letting go or the leaving behind, the loss and the uncertainty, and the stress of new beginnings. And I would definitely say in this last year, we've had so many changes piled on top of each other that we've had to really learn how to adapt to that change fairly quickly in many circumstances. Well, the change event usually happens quickly. The transition period usually is where the internal struggle and sometimes where the stress of change actually occurs. So change is essential, and it's a normal part of life, even though it can be challenging and difficult at times for all of us. It's just part of life. And so some changes are smaller, more mundane events that don't significantly impact our day to day. But then there's other changes like the worldwide pandemic we've all been experiencing that is much, much harder to cope with. So we're going to look at the stress response. Many of you have heard of the fight, flight, and freeze response, which is a very primitive response of our very primitive part of our brain that tries really to keep us safe. We also know that right now, in a recent poll, 1 in 5 Americans say they've had a physical stress reaction to the pandemic. 55% have experienced anxiety and depression, and 50% said they feel uncomfortable discussing mental health issues in the workplace. There's economic work stress, 70% report, basic needs, online learning, 71%, and government response to crisis, 61%. So this current pandemic has really impacted all of our lives, and for many of us caused a great amount of increased stress in many areas of our life. The disruptions we are experiencing create stress which causes cortisol to flood the limbic system of our brains, stimulating our emotion center, which is the amygdala, very primitive part of our brain, and distracting the parts of our brain that manage learning, memory, pleasure, focus, and joy. And also challenges a part of the brain that helps us with attention, concentration, and that's the prefrontal cortex. And when your stress system stays activated over a long period of time, or what we call chronic stress, it can lead to significant changes in your body and mind. These changes in the brain then impact our emotions, being cranky or moody, feeling sad, depressed, or hopeless. feelings of little or no control over the activities, the events, or situations, which enhances our stress load overall. And we use words like stuck or we have no choice when discussing many of our situational stressors. They can easily be the cause for overwhelm, frustration, and depression. So we're going to learn about different kinds of stress, and so we're going to talk about that now. And what I failed to mention was to really formally introduce myself, so I kind of want to do that now and just let you know that I have been a wellness coach for the past 18 years in private practice, but I also had the good fortune to work side by side with 4 family doctors for 8 years, where we really understood the mind-body connection. That with our patients that were coming in highly stressed, that we knew that it affected every system in the body. As a result, I also got training in mind-body skills. I'm a mindfulness meditation teacher, and I have a master's in counseling and psychology. After a long career, actually, in the HR business as well. So again, sorry, I just realized I hadn't really introduced myself, and I just wanted to give you some context for my background in helping my clients deal with stress. So, so these changes that our brain goes through, leads to feelings of moodiness, crankiness, feelings of sadness, and depression. And we have psychological stress, which is feeling a bit unequipped to handle a situation or thinking in a negative or exaggerated way about the past. And so we're going to just kind of take a look at these different kinds of stressors. So we have situational stress. And situational stress are, we're all familiar with these 3 different categories, but situational is made up from events, activities, or situations that occur in your daily life that bring out your stress response. And, these 3 different kinds of stress impact us in different ways. So whether you're a supervisor, entry-level CEO, or a member of a team, you're all feeling, different kinds of stress in different kinds of ways. So again, that situational stress feels us feeling a little bit out of control over these activities, these deadlines, these long working hours. Again, we use words like stuck or feeling like we have no choice. And it does lead to overwhelm and then a sense of frustration and depression. But typically with situational, there is a time frame or a structure where we have kind of a start-stop, beginning and an end to situational stressors. Now, psychological stressors are defined as feeling unequipped to handle a situation or thinking in a negative or exaggerated way about the past, present, or perceived future. Here's what we know about it. It's the most difficult stress to identify and reduce, such as phobias, low self-esteem or insecurities, pessimism. It's not saying that we can't, it's just this is a little bit more challenging. We're influenced by your upbringing. Sometimes then our environment can affect psychological stressors. It takes place completely in your mind and manifests through your thoughts and your words. And this is, of course, a good thing too, because this is where we can affect change when we get cognitively involved in making changes. Feeling justified and right, which limits potential for resolution, uses words like you don't understand or it's true, a fact, when discussing stressors, and can easily be attributed to anxiety and anger disorders. So perfectionism, fears and doubt, guilt, these are all psychological stressors. Physiological stress is the way your body physically responds to stress that creates unhealthy or harmful consequences. Here's what you need to know about this. It's often the most ignored or unnoticed type of stress. Has physical consequences on our nerves, endocrine, and immune systems. And this is what I deal with my clients. I mean, all of this I deal with my clients, but oftentimes our physical body really suffers because we might pick up some habits that are not necessarily healthy and then affect the entire body, such as overeating, not sleeping well, smoking, alcohol or drug use, not moving enough, being too sedentary. And so the cumulative effect of these psychological stressors can definitely cause serious damage to the health. They can be both internal and automatic reactions to stress or external habits used to cope with stress. They can have short or long-term effects on the body, just depending on, how long and how much you might be doing in this category. So we have situational, psychological, and physiological. And it's just good to be a little bit aware of all of these. So let's talk about workplace transition concerns. So we may be possibly looking forward to getting back into the workplace, but we're also have some trepidation, which is very natural to be worried and a little bit fearful about the safety protocols, how you're going to keep yourself safe, your coworkers, those visiting your business, and how are we all going to stay physically healthy. And then there's our mental health to be concerned about. So returning to work can lead to everything from a dip in your productivity to feeling a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit fear-based. You'll also have to be thinking about balancing your new schedules, right? And childcare, and are the kids going back to school, or are they staying home? And how are we going to work out homeschooling? How are we going to deal with elder care? So there's so many. Again, just as we had to rapidly last March make some rapid changes when kids came home and we came home, and everybody's at home together, or maybe no one's in your house and you're having to adjust to being very isolated and feeling very lonely. But as we work back into this transition, we're aware that these are some concerns that most people will be having. So we want to look at the stress cycle. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I want you to think about your stress as a cycle. And with this, we must also include in our definition of stress the ways in which stress is good for you and also bad for you. Typically, we think about stress only as a bad thing, something we need to try to avoid or prevent. But in fact, stress is a natural response in the body that is designed to help us in certain ways. Protect us, of course, keep us safe, and make and create optimal performance. I mean, I think oftentimes when I think about an athlete, a very superstar athlete, there's definitely stress there, but it helps them to perform. It's part of the natural cycle and is the process of recovery and returning back to a balanced state. And this is what we need to be looking at. That oftentimes we have stress cycles that don't return us back to a natural, healthy, balanced state. That we just have one not closed cycle on top of another not closed cycle. So you can see here in the diagram on the left, so you have a challenge, your stress level rises, and you slowly begin to recover, and then you run right into a meeting that gets your stress level up again. You're slowly starting to recover, and then you find you're running late to your next meeting or to pick up your kids or to get home or whatever it might be. So you can see how this stress cycle has just continued to escalate. And this becomes an unhealthy stress cycle in the body on every level, physical, mental, emotional. If you look on the right here, this is really what we're going for. It's more of a, we know stress happens, we know we get triggered. So there's a stress response. And then we have ways to calm ourselves down and we come back into recovery. Then we are running late, so we have a stress response, but then we come back down to balance before we go into our staff meeting, and then from there we go back into a normal recovery. So we want to look at these stress cycles, and we want to understand that we're all a little different, but the old stress, the way our body was designed, for example, when we were cavemen, our stress response kept us alive when a saber-toothed tiger tried to attack us. But when the threat had clearly passed, cavemen would consider themselves safe and return to that balanced state you see on the right side here. But our stressors today are different and happening back to back, moment to moment, constantly. And they just build on each other instead of coming back to a homeostasis, back to a state of balance. So today I want to focus less on the stressors themselves and more about how our unique stress cycles up and down and in and out. We all have different responses to triggers, right? And maybe we are triggered differently depending on each day, right? So did we sleep well last night? Did we have breakfast? Are we living on caffeine and sugar? Do we have an infant waking us up all night? Do we have a puppy waking us up all night? Or are we taking care of our elders? So all of these things can play into our stress cycles. If there's kind of low and underlying constant stress. But we want to talk today about through awareness, we can explore the science of what is happening in our bodies and brains and try different techniques to see what strategies work best for completing your stress cycle. So there's 3 approaches to the stress cycle. And for the rest of the time today, we're going to explore a variety of strategies that can be helpful in completing the stress cycle. First one is Comet. Second one is Reframe It. And the third one is Move It. And this is just a listing of many books that we use to pull together this talk and that we reference often. And they're wonderful books to help us move through the different stress cycles. It's important to remember that this cycle is separate from a stressor itself. This is your unique stress response, how your body changes in response to the stressor. So this stress cycle, came out of a recent book called Burnout that's shown here on the screen. And it talks about framing the stress as a cycle and visualizing it as a loop. And once the loop was activated by the stressor, it was now up to me, up to you, up to all of us to figure out how to close that loop. And in fact, this wasn't a psychological response, but there is a huge physiological component to the stress response. And therefore, there are many ways I can attempt closing that loop that will take an integrated approach. Integrated meaning that I can use my mind to calm my body and my body to calm my mind. We all know now the science is there to support that what's going on in the brain affects every system in the body and vice versa. So having an awareness about that gives us a lot of power to change things. So I have some highlights from some of the books and authors here we wanted to highlight rather, because these are really good ones to help teach different stress techniques we hear about all the time. And I wanted to share a much deeper understanding of various techniques and the science behind why they work, and more importantly, how you can use them to complete the stress cycle. So today we will explore these strategies within 3 approaches to complete the stress cycle. Again, Comet, Reframe It, and Move It. So starting with Comet, I want to read a quote from a very special man, Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a very famous quote. Between stimulus and response, there is always a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And as a mindfulness meditation teacher, this literally defines mindfulness. The stimulus is this stressful trigger, and our pause and our awareness as a mindful practitioner is to decide what am I going to do with this trigger? How am I going to choose my response? Whereas when we don't have certain techniques to support us, we tend to be much more reactionary to the events of our life. And when we're reacting without pause, without thought, without awareness, sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes we say things that we wish we hadn't, and we certainly are most often less calm. So we know that in life we'll inevitably experience failure, trauma, difficult events, etc. And while we can't control these events, we can control how we respond to them. And that's really the key to so much in terms of managing our stress response and really having a higher quality of life in general. In order to do that, we have to choose and access the rational problem-solving part of our brain. We need to calm that fight and flight or freeze response. So let's talk about how to do that. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the vagus nerve. It's not something we hear a lot about, although it's been talked about a lot more as of recent, but it is critical to calming our stress response. The vagus nerve system acts to counterbalance the fight and flight system and can trigger a relaxation response. So the fight and flight response is also referred to as the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. And when we calm that down, that's called the parasympathetic nervous system, or we also refer to it as rest and digest. This nerve is the longest nerve in your body. It connects your brain to many important organs throughout the body. And the vagus nerve is also a key part of your parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system. It influences your breathing, digestive function, and heart rate, all of which can have a huge impact on your mental health. For my clients who have digestive issues, I always suggest doing deep belly breathing, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to help activate that parasympathetic nervous system. If you have trouble sleeping, you're just feeling anxious and overwhelmed. So activating this nerve basically tells your brain that you are calm now and relaxed, while stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system to slow your heart rate and respiration and lower your blood pressure, which is all good. So 75% of all parasympathetic fibers are in the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve. So it's very cool to learn about that. And the cool thing about this is that we can stimulate our vagus nerve to send messages to our bodies that it's time to relax and de-stress. So as I mentioned, deep belly breathing. It's one of the very first things I teach all my clients. And certainly if I'm have clients that are coming in that are very, very anxious. And sometimes you can tell how anxious someone is just by hearing how they speak. If they're speaking really up here in the upper part of their lungs, it's like they can't get a deep breath. And that's indicating to me that this person is really operating from a chronic stress cycle that is not getting closed. So one of the quickest ways to do that is a very simple technique. It's called soft belly breathing. And when I trained with the Center for Mind Body Medicine in Washington, D.C., that was one of the very first things that we were taught. And this has been used all around the world in crisis situations, to just calm a body down. So whether someone's in crisis, someone's just having a difficult day, someone's having trouble sleeping, soft belly breathing is quick, powerful, and effective. So one of the main ways that you can stimulate this healthy function of the vagus nerve is through this deep belly breathing. And actually the receptors in your nose run directly to your amygdala, the fear center of your brain. This is the only sense that has this direct path to your fight or flight system. So a takeaway here is a calm and steady breath tells the brain that the outside world is safe and it's okay to calm down now. The moment we anticipate stress in any form, most of us tend to stop breathing and hold our breath. Many of us are not even aware of it. Breath holding actually activates the fight, flight, and freeze response. It tends to increase the sensation of pain, stiffness, anxiety, or fear. So if you're, going to a doctor's office or you're about to get a shot, it's a good idea to just take a few breaths to calm your body down so it won't hurt as much. So one simple practical exercise is to place one hand on your upper chest and the other just below your rib cage and breathe in slowly through your nose so that your stomach moves out against your hand. The hand on your chest should remain still as possible. Meanwhile, the hand on your lower belly should move slightly. So I'm going to walk you through a soft belly breath right now. So I want you to get comfortable in your chair. Place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly area. And I want you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. If it's safe to do that where you are. And now I want you to breathe in nice and slow through your nose. I'm going to count you up to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now hold it for a few counts. Good job. Wonderful. And now we're going to breathe out nice and slow through your mouth. All right, now begin breathing out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Good job. The key is we always want the exhale to be a little bit longer than the inhale, and that's what actually triggers the relaxation response. Let's do that one more time. Breathing in through our nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Hold it. Good. Beautiful. Good job. Now I want you to exhale through your mouth nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Fantastic. Now you're already starting to probably calm down, and we recommend that you maybe try doing these just a few times a day whenever you're feeling anxious or worked up or nervous prior to eating. If you're having trouble sleeping or going back to sleep, it's a good idea too. Good job. Now we're going to talk about something I absolutely love. I absolutely love this word, savoring. Savoring requires a deliberate, mindful awareness of the present moment to enjoy it fully, to appreciate it, and or relish it. Savoring is consciously spending time thinking about the good stuff from our past, what we're looking forward to in the future, and even what's happening right now around you. Is the sun out? Do you hear some birds chirping? Are the flowers already blooming? What are you savoring? Savoring is about being mindful and lingering on the positive experience of our life. Really sinking into, isn't this the most delicious meal? Isn't this the most amazing sunset? And just really speak it, be with it, slow down, linger in it. People who tend to savor more often have an overall greater well-being. Savoring is linked to happiness, optimism, self-esteem, and life satisfaction. And it may protect against hopelessness and depression. While some of us seem to do it naturally, for those of us who don't, it's fortunately a habit that can be taught. Yeah. So here's some examples of ways that you can savor. So marveling. These are all great words. Losing ourselves in awe and wonder. Luxuriating. Indulging our senses like we do when we bite into rich and delicious chocolate. Basking. Focusing on receiving praise. How often have you gotten a compliment and you just kind of was, oh, you didn't have to, or this whole thing, or really? Take it in. Thank the person. Smile big and bright. Receive the compliment. And Thanksgiving is expressing gratitude. Really talking about how much we appreciate this moment, this gesture, this effort, this experience, this kind act, giving thanks. So try savoring. And one of the, I lead a lot of guided meditations, and I ask people to create a little mental movie or a mental picture in their mind before it's over, knowing that they can go back to the scene in nature that they've created anytime they like, that they can just go back and savor that beautiful moment they created in their mind's eye. So that's another little tip. So now we're going to talk about presence. And presence is, again, very much connected to mindfulness. And so with mindfulness for beginners, you're invited to learn how to transform your relationship to the way you think, feel, love, work, and play, and thereby awaken to and embody more completely who you really are. Jon Kabat-Zinn, he's the founder of the American mindfulness movement. I call him the grandfather of mindfulness. He introduced the term mindfulness to the public back in 1991 when he published this now classic book called Full Catastrophe Living, using your mind and body to face stress, pain, and illness. He defines mindfulness as the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And that non-judgmentally is really important. In other words, mindfulness is not the thought or sensation itself, rather it is the awareness of the thought and sensation. You can be aware of the sounds around you. You can be mindful of your breathing, mindful of the thoughts jumping through your head, or mindful of any of your five senses. The key is that you're observing without judgment, positive or negative, and you're doing nothing to alter the present moment. And if you have an ongoing mindfulness practice, if you meditate, 5 to 10 minutes every day, this gift of presence just becomes part of who you are. This gift of awareness becomes who you are. So, for example, if there's a triggering stressful event, you can pause, you can check in and have awareness of how you feel, what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, and then you can decide your next course of action, which you'll probably make a better decision if you're coming from that awareness place, that presence place, versus that just fight and flight reactionary part of the brain. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can practice presence in everyday activities. If you're emptying the dishwasher, are you really focused on that? If you're washing the dishes, are you really focused on that? Or are you thinking about a million other things? Taking a shower, washing your hands, but especially if you're interacting with others and asking them, how was your day? But then you look down at your phone or walk away. Stay present, stay focused, be with that person. Yeah. And awareness is literally the definition of mindfulness, but it comes as a result of some practice. So it takes a little practice. There are many wonderful apps actually on the market right now that can help you develop a mindful practice, such as the Calm app, Insight Timer, 10% Happier. Those are a few that I like. So just some things to look into. All right, let's talk about reframing it. The best way to manage stress isn't to reduce or avoid it, but rather to rethink and even embrace it. Dr. Kelly McGonigal, she is a pioneer in this area of stress management. She kind of broke through some paradigms about the way we think about stress and really helped us understand after much research that there are some benefits to stress as well. So it's the perception of stress that's really important for us to learn about today too. And this was kind of new to me about 10 years ago. I had never really thought much about this, even though extensive training in stress management and techniques and mindfulness and such. So while we know that stress is associated with health problems, plenty of people with high stress lives are thriving. How's that possible? In 2012, researchers from the University of Wisconsin-Madison published looking at how 28,000 people perceive stress in their lives. People in the study answered these two questions. During the last 12 months, would you say that you experienced, the questions were a lot of stress, a moderate amount of stress, relatively little stress, or almost no stress at all? And the second question was, how much effect has stress had on your health? A lot, some, hardly any, or none. The researchers looked at death rates in the study group over 9 years. The results are startling. The study found that having a lot of stress in your life was not linked with premature death. But listen here, but having a lot of stress in your life and believing it was taking a toll on your health increased the risk of premature death by 43%. Let that sink in. Having a lot of stress in your life and believing it was taking a toll on your health increased the risk of premature death by 43%. So how we talk about stress, how we acknowledge stress, know that we want to close those cycles, but also understand that if we're constantly stressed about our stress, that isn't helping. So McGonigal cites another 2012 paper published by scientists at Harvard's Department of Psychology and asks what might happen if we change the way we think about stress. What if we thought about it as helpful? I mean, we do know that there's a tend and befriend stage of stress, that when we're stressed, we kind of reach out to others, hopefully, to get support, to get help, which is a good thing, which is part of the human condition, to connect with, and be supported by others and support others. A growing body of research suggests that cognitive appraisals are powerful tools that help shift negative stress states to a more positive one. So cognitive, how we think about things. Arousal reappraisal instructs individuals to think of stress arousal as a tool that helps maximize performance. So stress arousal can be a tool that helps to maximize performance. By reframing the meaning of the psychological signals that accompany stress, arousal reappraisal breaks the link between negative affective experience and unhealthy psychological responses. We demonstrate how this approach can benefit our attention, our performance, and explore its potential applications. Researchers have gone on to say that changing the way we think about our bodily responses can improve our physiological and cognitive reactions to stressful events. However, the underlying processes through which mental states improve downstream outcomes are not totally well understood. To this end, we examine whether reappraising stress-induced arousal could improve cardiovascular outcomes and decrease attentional bias for emotional negative information. So, participants were randomly assigned to either a reappraisal condition in which they were instructed to think about their physiological arousal during a stressful task as functional and adaptive, or to one of two control conditions, attention, reorientation, and no instructions. So participants instructed to reappraise their arousal exhibited more adaptive, healthier cardiovascular stress responsive, increased cardiac efficiency, and lower vascular resistance, and also decreased attentional bias. So, you know, just a different way to look at it, that this could be productive, that this can help me be more effective, did help lower the appraisal for those participating in the study. So is stress inherently bad? Well, Dr. Kelly McGonigal is having us challenge this theory. So if you look on the left here, the profile of the anxious, worried, and afraid around our stress response, you know, our blood vessels constrict, as opposed to if we are staying more positive, our profile is more joyous, courageous, and excited. Like, wow, you know, I'm taking on this new challenge. It's kind of exciting, kind of a different way to look at things. So, so you might want to take a look at Dr. McGonigal's TED Talk. It was TED Global 2013, kind of called Mind Over Matter. And it's really fascinating, her work in this area and how she explains it. So how we think about stress matters a lot in terms of how it can then negatively impact your mind and body. It may be hard to believe that such a small shift in thinking could make a difference, but that's what happens. Participants were asked to give a talk in front of a group of unfriendly evaluators, not fun for anyone, followed by a tricky word test. And researchers have consistently found this formula of public speaking test plus testing in front of a not very kind crowd is incredibly uncomfortable and stress-inducing for the people who agreed to take part in the study. They broke them up into 3 groups. Before the social stress test, one group was allowed to play video games, another was taught to simply ignore stressful feelings if they experienced them during the test, but a third group got a primer about the physical stress response and were told how a higher heart rate, faster breathing, and internal jitters were all tools for making you strong during a stressful event. They were told how the body's response evolved to help us succeed, and that the increased arousal symptoms of stress can aid your performance during times of stress. The bottom line of the lesson was this: in tough situations, stress makes you stronger. Well, you can probably guess the outcome. The group that learned to rethink the role of stress in their lives did far better on the test. They gave better speeches, they were rated as more confident, they smiled more, and had more positive body language. And the physiological indicators show that their bodies were also managing the stress response better than those of test subjects who were taught to ignore stress or given no advice at all. In a typical stressful scenario, your heart rate increases, like on the left again, and your blood vessels constrict. Not such a great thing. This resembles one of, again, this diagram on the left shows that anxious, worried, fearful person, whereas on the right we see the new way of looking. And so the body rises to the challenge, views it as helpful, and it can change the physiological responses in the body. And that resembles somebody who's more joyful, excited, and courageous. And this is much healthier. Now, I know this is a little easier said than done, and it's still not suggesting that we want to stay in that heightened state of stress, that we still want to close the cycle. But while we're experiencing it, and as we know, much of this is inevitable and unavoidable, kind of how we hold it in our mind and know that, it can be helpful at times, can help us overall. So when I'm stressed, my stress response is causing my breathing rate to increase. This means that, so here's the common view. My fast breathing is a sign of anxiety. I worry about how stress is affecting my mental and physical health. The alternative view, I should take a deep breath. Let's try that belly breathing Cheryl taught us. My faster breathing means more oxygen is getting to my brain so I can think more clearly, actually. So there you go. Just a different way to look at it and using it to your advantage. So I want to talk about kind of a new concept. It's kind of cool, post-traumatic growth. So I'm sure you've all heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, but have you heard of post-traumatic growth? Post-traumatic growth gives you the opportunity to claim a new label, a label that proclaims that you've been through difficult times and you didn't simply survive, but you actually thrived. And that's how we build resilience. And as humans, we are incredibly resilient. And if we haven't all learned that this past year, I mean, I'm just in awe and admire, so many people, how they've come through this. And I know we're not all really in the same boat because everybody is going through this in a different way, depending on your job and your family life and your finances and everything. I totally understand that. But we do, as humans, have a strong sense of resilience to us. And during difficult and stressful events, it can be helpful to accept struggle as part of it and to think of the struggle as somewhat useful. You thrive not in spite of it, but because of your experiences. And we grow through that. I know a lot of my friends and I have been talking with this year anniversary of the lockdown about what they've learned, how they've grown, what new skills they've taken on. So the first thing we want to look at is personal strength. What helps you to feel strong and to access resources within yourself? How do you cope with pain, emotional or physical? There are many ways of dealing with sensations and emotions that feel uncomfortable. And many of us seek out behaviors that have drawbacks or distracting from the pain rather than moving through it. What can you do to help you connect to yourself in a healthy way and process uncomfortable emotions? I deal with this a lot in my practice with people who are using alcohol or drugs or food as a way to deal with their uncomfortable emotions. Many find strength in creative endeavors like music and art, or exercise, sports, or in connecting with and helping others. Is a really good way, actually, to gain even more personal strength. Take some time to reflect on what could serve you best in this way. Let's look at relating to others. Social supports are a huge way that we move through difficulty. And it's a very primitive response in our body where we are meant to be connected. We are meant to be in community. And so trauma might lead us to get support, join a support group, confide in a friend, get counseling. We may also have a deeper sense of kindness and compassion for others who are suffering, leading us to relate to the world in an entirely new way. So take a moment to look at your relationships with family, friends, your community, and society at large. Where do you feel most connected, seen, and supported? These are places that can be helpful and healing. If you do not feel you have people who support you, now is a wonderful time to reach out, create connections, look for support, get counseling, call your EAP. So appreciation of life. Trauma brings us face to face with our mortality, and as such can lead us to appreciate and even treasure moments of peace or connection we have taken for granted. I would say that this is what I've heard the most from people, is that we've been faced with such a crisis, seeing so many people losing loved ones. And maybe some of you on the call have lost loved ones or have been very ill and are still very ill. Maybe loved ones have lost jobs and maybe can't find a job. And so we have this appreciation for this. We have this one life, and as we see others' lives get cut short in great numbers, as we've seen, we move quickly into an appreciation of the life that we have, and we really move more into that savoring, right? More into that being here now and looking for moments of peace and connection. Then we look at new possibilities. With trauma often comes an organic shift in perspective. Perhaps things that used to be meaningful no longer carry your interest. People tend to reshuffle their values. And so people who experience trauma often shift, again, what's most important and create new possibilities they didn't even know existed. And I think that's happening a lot with a lot of people right now. Spiritual change. Many trauma survivors report a shift in relating to the spiritual world. And traumatic experiences involve exposure to death or threatened death, which brings to the forefront question of mortality and afterlife. And we may find ourselves saying, why did this happen to me? And what has become of the person who passed? These questions and implications of how we understand ourselves and the world. It's a good time to reflect on ourselves and our life in the world, and ask some of those questions. Go deep. Ernest Hemingway so eloquently pointed out, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong in the broken places. Post-traumatic growth points to those places that become strong through exposure and experience. It may not be a painless process, we all know that, but seeking opportunities for growth can help create a deeper sense of connection and meaning in our lives. And may I also add that, as we get older and when we experience, different challenges, but we navigate through them, then oftentimes, we feel better and stronger at the end of it all. So think about something you have been struggling and surviving through, but not yet thriving. Maybe it's something you can journal about later, but something you're struggling and surviving through, but not yet thriving. Because now we're going to talk about the phases of post-traumatic growth. We know the struggle is both inevitable and useful, and struggle and trauma happen in everyone's life. Nobody can get to adulthood without having some kind of struggle. It's useful because it forces you to reflect on what's true about yourself and about the world. Post-traumatic growth gives you the opportunity to claim a new label, a label that proclaims that you have been through a difficult time and you didn't simply survive it, you thrived through it. You thrive not in spite of, but because of your experience. So let's talk about education. Understand the impact of the struggle has on your mind, your body, your heart, and your spirit, and recognize the physiological and psychological impacts of struggles. You can identify the signals that mean you are growing through them, growing, learning, stretching, exploring. Regulation. This is about finding practices that keep you grounded and well. We learned one today, soft belly breathing. We talked about mindful meditation. Practices are things you actively do on a consistent basis that allow you to connect your head and your heart and calm your mind and your body. Exercise could be a practice. Meditation, guided meditation, soft belly breathing. Disclosure. The third phase of PTG is hard work. It involves look back to move forward. It's not what's wrong. It's what happened. Be open and honest with the events of your past and that have shaped you. And then a positive news story. You get to create a positive story about your future. a story that speaks to who you are, why you exist, where you're going, and who is joining you on your journey. And then service, finding a way to use the experiences of your life, both good and difficult, to do good for others, even if it's just helping someone navigate a difficult situation that you've already experienced, if they're open to your advice and support, right? So writing about positive experiences, this is something I do with my clients, can be incredibly helpful. And it helps to, writing about positive emotions especially, may help reduce stress and anxiety. Barbara Fredrickson from the University of North Carolina suggests that one of the differences between positive and negative emotions is that positive emotions broaden our sense of what we can do, whereas negative emotions narrow this sense, right? It just opens up our world. A negative emotion is telling us that something is dangerous and we had better attend to it. So we narrow our focus to the potential threat and work out how to make it go away. If we feel anger, for example, we have the sense that we or someone we care about has been wronged and we want to attack in order to restore justice. It takes a lot of energy, right, to use anger in that way. Now, I'm not saying anger is bad. It sometimes motivates us to make changes, which is a positive thing. Anxiety makes us churn the threat over and over in our minds, trying to work out what might happen and what we could do to prevent it if we are scared and we want to retreat. But positive emotions have an opposite experience. It tends to open our hearts and helps us to increase our memory, our attention, our awareness, increases happiness and health, improves the relationships in our lives, and downregulates the psychological and physiological states related to negative emotions. So science has shown that writing about positive experiences for 20 minutes a day for 3 consecutive days improved people's mood and led to fewer visits to the doctor. Even writing for as little as 5 minutes about a positive experience has been shown to reduce the number of health complaints. So give it a try. And yeah, and these are some words that come to mind when we're writing about positive experiences. So groups of 37 participants were asked to write about the most wonderful experience in their life for 20 minutes a day for 3 days. And afterwards, they measured their levels of anxiety. And we found significantly greater decrease in anxiety for those people who wrote about positive experiences compared to those who wrote about neutral topics. The participants also reported their levels of stress, anxiety, and physical health complaints 4 weeks after they completed the writing test went greatly down. We also found that writing about happy moments was effective, regardless of the level of distress that people reported at the start of the study. Do you feel joy remembering this moment shared with a person as an example? Do you feel grateful for this person being in your life or grateful for the experience you had together while you look at a photo? These are just some examples. So try it out and, see how it makes you feel. What brought you awe? What brings you gratitude? What inspires you? What makes you feel hopeful and proud? What opens your heart to love? Now we're moving into gratitude. It's one of my favorite practices. I practice it every single day. I recommend to my clients, especially those experiencing anxiety, to incorporate gratitude into their life. According to the literature in positive psychology, gratitude is the most powerful of all the positive emotions. It helps create a solid foundation for experiencing more happiness. It helps to create more relaxed body state, relieving feelings of stress. It actually changes the brain. The more connections and synapses are looking for the good, the more easily they can find the good. And of course, the opposite is true. The more we're looking for negative experiences, negative qualities, the more easily the brain can move into that space. So if you're finding that your brain has moved into a negative space for too long, try a gratitude practice. I suggest to my clients they find a gratitude partner and they text them. They ask them to commit to 30 days of texting 3 things each day you're grateful for and having them reply back to you with 3 as well. And just make a 30-day commitment and see how much fun you have. You get to know this person, you're receiving their gratitudes, and you're sending yours. It's a fabulous, fabulous thing. Robert Emmons, psychology professor and gratitude researcher at the University of California, Davis, explains that there are so many benefits of practicing gratitude. We affirm the good things we've received. We acknowledge the role other people play in providing it, and it does help relieve stress. The regions of the brain associated with gratitude are part of the neural networks that light up when we socialize and experience pleasure. These regions are also heavily connected to the parts of the brain that control basic emotion regulation, such as heart rate. We feel less pain. And so give it a try. You can maybe speak it out loud at the dinner table with your family. You can tuck in your child at night and express gratitude to each other. And research also shows that the neural connection between gratitude and altruism is very deep. It encourages us to be more generous. We don't say thanks for selfish reasons, far from it. Gratitude, like giving, is its own reward. And remember, it lights up those brain centers, reward centers of the brain, which is all good. Move it. We are no longer able to change a situation. We are challenged to change ourselves. Back to Viktor Frankl. We know that physical activity influences many positive brain chemicals, including endorphins, that give you energy, alleviate worry, and help you bond with others. So exercise is a wonderful way to blow off steam, make your brain feel good, and keep your body healthy. So it does also stimulate the vagus nerve, which leads to beneficial brain and better mental health benefits. As human beings, we are hardwired to take pleasure in the activities, experiences, and mental states that help us survive. So the neurochemical state that makes running gratifying, the runner's high, may originally serve as a reward to keep early humans hunting and gathering. After significant effort and persistence, the brain releases reward hormones that make us feel good. It also helps reduce inflammation in the brain, which over time can protect us against many things, including depression, anxiety, memory loss, and loneliness. It actually remodels the physical structure of your brain to make you more receptive to joy and social connection. So go get some of those great hormones. Scientists call them hope molecules. So studies show that when you take regular exercisers and make them replace physical activity with a sedentary activity for 2 weeks, they become more anxious, tired, and hostile. It's better to be physical. We are wired to move. I don't know if anyone's tried this cool pose, but it's wonderful. It's legs up pose. And there's growing research on the benefits of certain yoga poses, and this is one of them. This particular pose supports the blood flow of blood back to your heart, which sends a message to the body and the nervous system to move into rest and digest. So it activates parasympathetic by supporting the pelvis and opening the chest and letting the diaphragm rest with ease, and helps you breathe more slowly, sends signals to the brain to remain calm, and then supports the lymph system. So if you've ever been on a long flight or been sitting too long, it's also a great thing to try out. Manage it. Life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. Steve Maraboli, Life, the Truth, and Being Free. We thought we'd be back to the workplace by now, but many are more isolated than ever. We thought work-life balance would be in check by now, but many are still working longer and harder than before and with no end in sight. Despite this prolonged period of crisis, many organizations are experimenting and with different approaches to re-energize their exhausted workforces and make changes to emerge stronger and together. Leaders must actively manage the energy of their workforces, cultivating the quality of employee relationships and demonstrate a capacity for resilience to recharge their organizations during this crisis. The leader's role right now is to show compassion and to temper hope with a realistic framework that resonates with employees. So as we think about workplace transition, while we're all planning to help keep employees physically safe, let's not forget the impact of COVID-19 on psychological health. The anxiety generated by these circumstances have produced fatigue, concentration problems, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, other drugs, and worsening of its existing health conditions. And all of this can impact how we come back to work and how we perform in the workplace. So just be aware of this as we move forward. So our goal, of course, is supporting employees' well-being. As an employer, how should I respond to stay proactive and aware of my employees' mental well-being? Well, first of all, don't be afraid to ask. With so much stigma around mental health issues in the workplace, managers and colleagues are often afraid of asking how someone is doing. Yet noticing small warning signs and checking in with employees shows caring and concern, and it may hopefully open that door for the employees to share stressors they're experiencing at home or with the workplace transition during COVID. And we all hope to see the day when mental health does not have the stigma attached that it once did. Ask your employees, what do they need? We want to acknowledge that employees have unprecedented demands during this time. And, you know, all of our employees are struggling, and their family members, their loved ones are juggling new roles, especially parents with school-age children, of course. Leadership and managers need to be compassionate and responsive and bolster the offerings in your employee wellness program or EAP. Consider quarterly paid mental health or wellness days and offering virtual meditation or yoga classes, or even instituting a meeting-free block each week. Initiatives like this can help paint a clear message to your employees that their health and wellness matters to you. Consult with specialists to offer wellness webinars. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a dramatic spike in mental health problems, with cases tripling, with now 1 out of every 4 adults experiencing depression. So help your employees manage their re-entry anxiety. While workforce re-entry certainly includes logistical and operational planning, we have been talking about, it's equally important that organizations will respond to employees' emotional and psychological health. So make employees' your well-being your top priority. Employees want reassurance that their companies will make their people first whenever possible, especially in these difficult times. Provide consistent communication and updates to employees. That helps relieve anxiety, knowing what's going on, knowing what the plan is, knowing as the plan changes, and just communicate, communicate, communicate. Not surprisingly, research shows that employees who regularly receive updates from their companies are more likely to have positive views of their employers. They're more likely to be proud to work for their companies and look forward to going back to work. Be sure to take swift action to implement recommended public health measures. Employees trust top public health experts by and large, and fewer than 1 in 10 would feel safe returning to the office when only their employer say it's safe. Train leaders, managers, and colleagues on how to support employees during this difficult transition. Managers will need to take a greater responsibility for employees' well-being and looking for signs of emotional distress, factoring more time into their days for checking with staff, and helping team members understand what is and isn't within their control. Learning really how to triage real-time issues while other resources are called upon to help. And flexibility. We've had the biggest, largest scale work from home experiment ever. And it has shown that at least for some industries, it is possible to get work done, not only remotely, but on a variety of schedules that best accommodate people's preferred working hours and personal commitments. So reduce anxiety and discuss and align on how to handle these issues now. Will we still work from home? Can we do that part-time? Can our hours shift and change? These are all things that employees will be looking for. And strategies to help boost resilience at work. The following strategies have been shown to boost resilience and combat symptoms of stress. So creating an end of the workday daily rituals that allow employees to turn off work mode. Scheduling short breaks throughout the day to talk, a brief walk, or stretch. Reserving time for every morning before starting the workday to write in a gratitude journal, or focus on someone or something that gives you a sense of joy. Find that gratitude partner. Promote healthy lifestyle habits like encouraging employees to carve out time during the workday to have a proper midday meal, and create opportunities for connection in the workplace. So what are you going to put into action in the coming days and weeks to help you complete your stress cycle and stress better? So we just want to remind you that we are here for you and your family. ibhssolutions.com/members. Thank you so much again for joining us today. We wish you the very best of luck as you transition back to the workplace, as that happens in every industry a little bit differently. And we hope this has been helpful and enjoyable. Remember to be patient and kind to yourself and others. Thank you so much for joining today. Bye-bye.